New construction is cooking the books on home prices big time, and you need to know what's going on. Well, hello, this is Wendy Pinnell, and new construction home builders in Dallas have found themselves in a bit of a pickle with the housing market. You see, rising interest rates spell trouble for affordability, right? The higher the rates, the fewer folks can afford to buy. And if people can't afford to buy, well, you'd expect prices to take a nosedive, right? I mean, the whole housing crash thing. I mean, that's what we all thought would happen. I mean, heck, there are enough videos predicting housing market crashes to fill a movie marathon. What we thought we would see is huge price drops and bankrupt builders. Instead, name of the game with new construction these days is incentives. Builders are offering fixed rate mortgages as low as 4.99% when the market is flirting with 7%. Interest rates make a huge difference, and builders are able to entice buyers into taking on more debt because their monthly payment is lower. They're not stopping at interest rates though. Builders are also offering money at the design center, or they'll pay for your closing costs. All right, now these incentives, they make their homes more reachable, right? Without forcing them to lower their asking prices. So, buyers, they get enticed by the lower monthly payments, but they end up with a very expensive home. But hey, burden doesn't feel that heavy, right? Because the builder is offering a reduced fixed rate mortgage as an incentive. It's a clever little strategy they've got going on here that's keeping the new construction market in Dallas hopping. Now you might be thinking, Wendy, that's just new construction. The rest of the market's not paying down rates like that. To which I would say, what rest of the market? New listings of pre-owned homes in Dallas are down 23.9%. All of our homeowners out there are sitting on their 3% mortgages. They don't want to sell their homes and trade up for a 7% mortgage, right? So there are just not that many pre-owned homes for sale. Meanwhile, new construction listings are up 1.5%, okay? The reality is that new construction has a huge presence in the market right now, and all the builders are interfering with home prices and home appraisals. Now, when it comes to new builds, building from the ground up, builders can't offer the reduced rate mortgages, okay? It's just too far into the future. So instead, they're taking a different approach, all right? Basically, their approach is that they don't care that they're charging more than the home is worth. They know it's not going to appraise today, but it doesn't have to. They're simply going to tell you the market is going to go up in the 11 months it takes to build the home, so there's no reason for them to sell it for what it's actually worth right now. And you can argue until you're blue in the face about current market value, but these builders and their sales consultants, they're just going to shrug and tell you by the time the home is ready, it'll be worth what you're paying for today. And they're gonna, sweeten the deal by throwing in incentives. You're probably gonna get yourself a nice little credit in the design center and towards your closing costs. But chances are, if you want a new build, it's gonna cost you. Now, lest I make them out to be total villains, I get why they're being so inflexible. The builders know they're not going to see a dime for almost a year, okay? They're also sweating about potential increases in building and labor costs during the build time. Some builders try to cover themselves with escalation clauses, but most don't. And if you don't know what an escalation clause is, in a nutshell, it's when a contract price can change based on cost increases for materials. So if the cost of materials goes up, the price for your home goes up, even when you're already under contract. Well, escalation clauses got such bad press that most builders don't include them in their contracts anymore. But this just makes them, dig their heels in even harder on price, because they're essentially placing a fixed price on a variable. They're taking on a 10 to 12 month risk, and they'll be darned if they're gonna make that worse by lowering the price. All right, meanwhile, though, the buyer is also taking a gamble, because they're often overpaying against what the home is actually worth in real time. Now, we're always very open with our buyers on this, okay? We research those market sales, present the reports to the sales consultants, and I'm telling you, they don't care. So they're propping up home prices with new builds by saying home sales are gonna go up in the 10 to 12 months it takes to build the home. Then there are inventory homes. Now, this is a whole different ball game. This is where the low fixed rate mortgages come into play. As soon as the home is finished, the builder starts bleeding money, right? They want that home off their books ASAP, but they really don't want to lower their prices. So this is where we see all those mortgage buy downs coming into play. Now, I will tell you this, there are plenty of builders who we can still get down on price. I mean, we've managed to score some amazing deals for our buyers, but a lot of builders are still standing their ground. We recently negotiated $90,000 off of a sale. But again, many builders in the current market will tell us, we're not coming down on our price because we don't have to. And with the lower interest rate they're offering, there are more buyers who can afford their homes. The bottom line is appraised value is not a huge concern for home builders. They want the highest they can make, and if that takes, striking a deal, they will. And there are still, plenty of deals to be had, okay? But if they can get you to pay more than the home is worth, heck, all the better, right? Well, now that we know what the builders are up to with home prices, we need to talk about how this is affecting appraisals, because it is Russian roulette big time. And I get right now that you might be thinking, what's an appraisal? Why should I care? Well, Investopedia defines an appraisal this way. It is an unbiased professional opinion of a home's value. The lender uses this appraisal to decide how much they can lend you. So to the extent we've been talking about home prices and the builder not particularly caring if you pay more than the home is worth, you can be assured one party that cares very much is your lender, right? They're doling out the big bucks here, and they want to know how much the collateral is worth. If you're buying a $300,000 house and you're getting a loan, okay, let's just say you're putting 10% down, you'll have $30,000 of skin in the game, and your lender will have $270,000 of skin in the game. Now, here's what you need to know. A lender is only going to loan based on the value of the home. The sales price isn't even relevant when it comes to this. It is only the appraised value. So we have this situation where the builders are not particularly concerned, okay, with what a home will appraise for. Then we have the lender who cares very much about what the home appraises for. And then we have you somewhere in the middle. We mentioned you buying a $300,000 home with your down payment being $30,000 and the lenders being $270,000. If an appraiser comes in and says that home is worth $250,000, for example, the lender's no longer lending $270,000. In fact, he's not even lending $250,000. He's going to loan 90% of the appraised value of the home, just like he always was. In this case, he'd be loaning $225,000. You no longer have a $30,000 down payment. Now you have a $75,000 down payment. Now, this is why your home's value through an appraisal is so incredibly important. I mean, yes, you don't want to be upside down on your home, okay? Meaning you owe more than your home is worth. But you could end up without a home at all if the appraisal comes in low, or you could end up with a ton of less cash than you counted on. You might be asking yourself, if an appraisal comes in low, won't the builder just sell it for what it's worth? Well, no, they absolutely will not. Now, if you're buying a pre-owned home and the appraisal comes in low, you have a few safety nets, okay? You can have various contingencies in effect that at least protect your earnest money. Often the seller will drop the price to match the appraisal, or the seller can meet, the buyer in the middle. But new construction, totally different ballgame, okay? Builders typically have clauses in their contracts that require you, the buyer, to make up any difference if the appraisal comes in below the sales price. As an example, Normandy Homes makes it pretty simple in their contract, okay? They say in some instances, the appraised value of the real estate may be lower than the purchase price. Purchaser understands, acknowledges, and agrees that seller will not reduce the purchase price or contribute in any way to an appraisal shortage of the real estate. Grand Homes has their own way of saying essentially the same thing. They say seller makes no representation or warranty with regard to the appraised value of the home. If the appraised value of the home is less than the purchase price and the amount of the loan is reduced by the lender, then purchaser shall pay that difference between the reduced loan amount and the purchase price in cash at closing. Now, Bloomfield Homes says if there is a low appraisal, Bloomfield Homes will not reduce the price. In fact, I have yet to find a builder anywhere who allows price negotiations after the fact. If that appraisal comes in below the sales price, you will be making up the difference if you want to buy that home. And many buyers at this point will be very upset and indignant. Why should they have to pay more than what the home is worth? What you have to realize is it doesn't matter how you feel, okay? You've already agreed in the contract to make up any difference. This is why it's important, so very, very important, to use a solid realtor when you're buying new construction. All right, we at Home in Dallas do our homework on home values, so our buyers know what they're getting into. We face builders who will come down in price. We face builders who won't. But no matter the case, you as the buyer need a market analysis before you assume the risk of an appraisal coming in low. And at the very least, we at Home in Dallas are going to provide that for you. All right, speaking of which, if we sound like your kind of people, you're definitely going to want to check out our Let's Find Home questionnaire that you can find in the description section. Here's the kicker though, and where things get really sobering. Let's just say you've closed on your home with a beautiful 5% interest rate and you paid $400,000 for it. Your future neighbor is on the way, excited to be buying a home just like you. They apply for their loan and their lender, of course, orders an appraisal because remember, the appraised value of the home matters big time to the lender. Well, the appraiser will look up past home sales on the MLS, including yours, to arrive at an appraised value. On the MLS, it's going to report how much the builder paid you in incentives, if they paid down your interest rate, paid your closing costs, all right, that sort of thing. That's all gonna show up on the MLS. Well, here's the kicker. The moment an appraiser sees what you paid for your home, he deducts the value of any incentives from the home's value. So say a home sells for $400,000 and the seller paid $20,000 to pay down the interest rate and towards the buyer's closing costs. The appraiser deducts that $20,000 right off the top. So right out of the gate, the appraiser is saying your home isn't worth the price tag, okay? It's worth that minus the $20,000 in incentives. Yeah, you heard me right, okay? The appraiser adjusts the value of your home based on how much the seller paid in incentives. Now, the problem is you won't see this happening. Appraisers base their evaluations on past sales, so it's all behind the scenes. But future buyers, they're gonna feel the impact. I can't help but wonder when this will catch up to the market. It may take some time, and here's why. This usually only becomes a stumbling block, so to speak, when you use a third-party lender. When you use the builder's lender, the appraisals always seem to come in at value regardless of incentive adjustments. Now, in fairness, all right, we have to be fair here, an affiliated appraiser has access to all the sales of the builder, while a third-party appraiser only sees what's on the MLS, right? So, if the appraisal comes in low, for you and your sale, your first step in the appeal process of that appraisal should be to request those off-market sales from the builder. Now, I do want to make this point because I think it is noteworthy. Why is it that builders have off-market sales that are higher than those on the MLS? Well, it's all the buyers who went straight to the builders and didn't use a realtor. Right? The truth of the matter is, if you don't have a realtor providing you with a solid market analysis, you don't know what that home is worth and you're going to end up overpaying. So bottom line on that, without access to home sales data, you may very well pay too much. Some builders will list their homes $100,000, $150,000 above what they're worth. So if you don't have the data, all right, you're flying blind. Now, by this point, you might be wondering why anyone would want to buy new construction. And the answer is simple. That's pretty much what's available in Dallas. All right, so then the question becomes, what can you as a home buyer do to navigate this, knowing this is all going on? Well, first off, let's consider pre-owned homes. All right, these are not seeing that same crazy surge in values because individual sellers, they can't play around with interest rates like the builders can. They don't own their own mortgage companies. But here's the rub. Inventory for pre-owned homes is down. Folks who locked in at 3% interest rates aren't exactly chomping at the bit to trade up for a 7% rate, right? So even with a hefty chunk of equity, many homeowners would be hard pressed to find anything better than what they already have. Now, if you come in as a home buyer of a pre-owned home, keep in mind that that seller doesn't have a mortgage company in their back pocket, right? You're going to have to use a third-party lender, and that means you're going to get around a 6.5% to 7% interest rate. I would definitely negotiate having the seller pay down the rate, but it's probably going to take more to get less, okay, if that makes sense, because the seller in this case wouldn't be directly affiliated with the lender. Now, for whatever reason, could be because there's more selection, maybe you like the idea of new, 5% interest rates are calling your name, you might find yourself considering new construction. If that's the route you go down, how should you deal with this whole issue of home values and appraisals? First things first, you have to have a firm grasp on value. You absolutely must have that comprehensive market analysis. That means, pulling off-market sales from the builder, thoroughly researching market sales and then reviewing an analysis based on what the builder has been accepting, as well as what the neighborhood as a whole supports. Now, some builders will readily participate in providing us this information, like Bloomfield and Crowley and Terrace and Fort Worth, Centex and Hazlitt. They've all been very cooperative. But then we have K. Hovnanian in McKinney as an example. Their North Creek subdivision, it's in a low tax bracket, Prosper ISD, which is an excellent school district, and it has good highway access. The builder doesn't have any sold homes on the MLS yet because they're still really new. So, I asked the sales consultant, hey, can we see, your sold homes data? And her response was no. Even if they had that information, they weren't going to provide it. She said it wasn't our business, and they would charge what they wanted to charge. So getting a market analysis on this community was challenging. We had to go outside the neighborhood, but keep within the school district. Sometimes the sales consultants are very cooperative, and other times not so much. So this whole market analysis thing, okay, it's not for the faint of heart realtor. Now, if you decide to go with a new build, keep in mind that the builder is probably not going to care if the home costs more than it's worth. They're assuming a risk, okay, knowing that building costs could go up. So think carefully about your upgrades. The more you splurge on those swanky countertops and fancy pendant lights, the more likely you'll end up owing more than the home is worth. So stick to upgrades that add value, okay? We're talking flooring, kitchens, bathrooms. All right, that extra gate on your fence or like upgraded door hardware, those aren't going to add value. Now, when it comes to inventory homes, I almost hate saying this, okay, but you're probably going to end up having to use the builder's lender. It's the only way you're going to get that reduced rate mortgage. They're going to have access to more sales data than a third-party appraiser. And honestly, let's face it, there is usually some kind of affiliation there. That's why, again, you absolutely need independent sales data. Okay, if you're going to buy with new construction, you do not want to go in blind on this. Along with having a strong market analysis, I really recommend you not narrow your options too much. I understand that sometimes you will and sometimes you have to, but if possible, be willing to consider multiple school districts and multiple areas. The more you narrow your search, the more leverage the builder has. So be willing to look at everything out there, okay? Both what's listed on the MLS and what isn't. Our genius behind the scenes, Bree, she spends hours scouring locations for new construction hotspots that aren't showing up on the MLS. There is a whole science to it, and honestly, sometimes that's where you find your best deal. So our objective here, okay, is to find a builder who's ready to negotiate. The truth of the matter is, even in a hot market, there are still plenty of motivated builders out there. You just have to know where to look. In fact, if you want to know more about how to find a motivated builder, you're definitely going to want to check out this video you can watch right here. In the meantime, Wendy out.